media is wanting to tell you buying is not as good as renting. I think that's ironic. The New York Times here had an article come out, and what you'll find in this link here is it's a real-time calculator. But the default, when you click on, and this article was published literally 4 days ago, the default is preset to where when you look at it, you go, oh man, it's $133,000 better over 10 years to rent than it is to buy. But the key here is that's a default. Welcome back to the What's More podcast. We're here at episode 162. I'm your host, Quinton Harris. And, we're kind of counter on the last episode we just did about stagflation. But if you remember the episode before that, we talked a little bit about credit card debt. And I know I sound like a broken record with that, but there's some serious things going on here that I'm going to continue my trend of why the Federal Reserve is poised and set to give us some good news at the next FOMC meeting. So yesterday, it would have been, what's today's date? So it would have been Monday, the 13th. And this episode, I think, will come out tomorrow on the 15th. There's some signs. There's some more cracks coming in the armor. So we got a consumer confidence index, and today we got the PPI index. But I want to break down that consumer confidence index and why that was important. And then I want to kind of take a look at the media side of things and what they're saying and why that's important. So first things first, consumer confidence. This comes out of the University of Michigan, and it was off, down, meaning it was not confident at all. And actually, it was one of the lowest readings we've had in some time and one of the sharpest drops. So what they do is they survey a group of consumers on how they feel about the job market, about the spending rates, as well as their confidence in the economy. And so what was interesting here is that it went from a 77.2 index reading to a 67.4. Now, why is that important? Again, it's one of the lowest readings we've seen. It's one of the sharpest drops we've seen. But there was also representative in that survey a big drop in spending across the board. Now, this goes with those past two episodes I just mentioned because why? Savings rates are down. Matter of fact, they're one of the lowest we've seen pre-COVID. And again, we talked about in those episodes. If you want to hear more about that in episode 159, check us out at our YouTube channel at What's Your One More. We've got all the graphs on there and all the information about that spending and credit card debt. Now, as doom and gloom as that sounds, it's a reality. And the reality is we're seeing delinquency rates up in credit card debt. We're seeing application denial in new credit cards at the highest rate we've seen over the last 20 years. And we're also seeing credit card debt at the highest it's been. Now we're starting to get some information coming on the backside from this buy now, pay later. And we've talked about that. We were wondering when that was going to show up. We had kind of estimated there was close to about $88 billion of buy now, pay here later out there. But that was more of like a guess. We kind of used a deviation there of the amount of debt, but we don't know. What we do know now is that the information that's coming in. So let's talk about buy now, pay later. That's going to be your Affirm. That's going to be your Karma. And you know what I'm talking about. Anytime you go to buy a product online, you'll see the advertisement. Do you want to buy this over 6 months? And even when you go to check out, do you want to purchase over a 6-month plan? And it's a buy now, pay later. Years ago, we would have called that layaway. But now we've come up with a term called buy now, pay later. And the reality is just because you're getting it now and then you can pay for it later and it's over 6 months. I mean, we can even do this down to a pair of shoes. And if you think about what I just said there, financing a pair of shoes over 6 months, that speaks to the environment that we're in. It speaks to two things. Number one, where we are in the cost of things and some of the struggles that's taking place from the consumer side, because you're having to choose, okay, do I need a new pair of shoes? Do I pay rent? Do I buy groceries? Do I deal with my electrical bills? I know that's happening. You guys are giving us great feedback on our YouTube channels and on our socials. We know that's the case. And so we're seeing that firsthand from the streets there with you guys, but also the fact that now the delinquency rates are up 43% on this Affirm and Credit Karma. Now, delinquency rate's up. Now, what that means is that people are behind on the payment. So if you're supposed to make a payment every 6 months, once a month over 6 months, it's paid off. That means you're missing a payment inside that 6 months. And there are some penalties that come with that. But the reality is no one's going to go back and repossess, in this case, a pair of shoes or take the clothing that you bought. And we've talked about that. There's no repercussion in this revolving credit card market. And so that is an issue. Now, what we're seeing, though, is that's showing up on credit reports. That was not always the case. And I can tell you that because we're seeing it from the client side of things on the lending side. And so it may have a different kind of repercussion, very similar to that of a credit card. And so I think that that's very important, something we're going to continue to watch. But 43% on that, I think, is not a shocker to anyone. I was talking to my producer, Charlie, before the show, and I'm like, does that shock you at all that the buy now, pay later is delinquent by 43%? And he's like, no, absolutely not. And maybe because we talk about it so much, but I think as you're listening to this, you probably understand that that's not the case. That's not surprising in this case. And the other thing is that in this same survey, the consumers are not feeling good about the economy nor their finances. Well, yeah, I think we just talked about that, right? We know that's the case. The data is showing that. Now, what does this mean? If you're the Federal Reserve, your goal is to have a soft landing. One of the major impacts of a soft landing is not to avoid a recession at all costs. Now, recessions can come in many different ways, and oftentimes economists say you never know you were in a recession until you're out of one, right? Because it's not deemed that you were in one until months, sometimes quarters later of being out of it. Now, the reality is this, that there are signs, there's real-time data letting us know that this job market's not as aplenty as we think. We're starting to see that come in the BLS reports, and that right now the spending is not as good as it once was. And we're starting to see that, and now we're seeing it on the front line, like almost I like to call it herd on the streets. When the consumers are telling us that, and the job market surveys are coming back that they're not good, this is the sign. And I think this is what the Federal Reserve is absolutely worried about, because if you recall, 17 of the 19 voting members have said, hey, listen, if this unemployment range gets somewhere between 3.9 and 4.1, we think we need to start cutting rates. Well, we're at 3.9 right now. We're going to get another reading of that before the next FOMC meeting. We're also going to get a PCE reading, which is the Fed's favorite form of inflation, and we'll get one more CPI right before that meeting. And that's going to be the tell sign combined with all these other things we keep showing right now. But we're at 3.9. And if 11 of those 19 voting members don't like 3.9, they're really not going to like 4 or 4.1 if that shows up on the table. And that's almost like in given you're going to get that relief we've been looking for here. Another thing in this consumer confidence report that we got is that employment has fell, meaning when they're surveying people, people have lost their jobs. And it fell by 15 points, which basically matches, if you think about this, it matches the same read we got in August of 2011. Well, look at where the world was in August of 2011. We were coming on the outside of a financial crisis. We were coming out of a recession, but that's the survey results that we're getting right now. And so I think when I see that, these are warning signs of the labor market. And I think we've beat a dead horse to death about inflation and what's going on there. But the labor market is the one that we're all pointing towards, all eyes are on that. And almost 40% of the consumers in this particular survey anticipate that the unemployment rate is going to continue to go up. And they're also fearful of losing their jobs. That's a big thing, because a surge that's usually this large is about double of the normal month-to-month surge that you see in that confidence index. Now, this is not a market mover, it's not a game changer, but it's data, it's real-time data that we're getting, which is extremely important. And I think that that's something that we're not getting enough out from the media about what's going on. What we are getting from the media is they're wanting to tell you right now why buying is not as good as renting. Now, I think that's ironic. The New York Times here had an article come out, and hats off to our friends over at MBS Highway. They absolutely got ahead of the curve on this, crushed it. I'll give complete credit to Dan Habib over there and Barry Habib, but they got right in front of this. And the reality is this, this article, this calculator that the New York Times, and this link's going to be, and Charlie will put this in our YouTube channel at What's Your One More, but what you'll find in this link here is it's a real-time calculator. But the default, when you click on, and this article was published literally 4 days ago, the default is preset to where when you look at it, you go, oh man, it's $133,000 better over 10 years to rent than it is to buy. But the key here is that's a default. There's a lot of assumptions in this calculator that are not correct. And I mean, again, you'll see what I mean here. For example, they're using a home price of $500,000 that as an average home price. Depending on what market, you live when you're listening to this podcast, it may not be $500,000. But for the purpose of this conversation, let's assume it is. I think we would all agree that the next component they assume is that the monthly of equivalent, they're calling this an equivalent of rent to the $500,000 would be $2,000 a month. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't think there's a place in the United States that's a $500,000 home that you're going to rent for $2,000. Maybe there's a few, maybe there's a couple pockets, but that's not normal. So there's one of the first assumptions that's off. Obviously, they use a 10-year model, so we'll stick with that. The average mortgage rates and the details on the mortgage, I've got no problem with on that. 30 years, 20% down payment. However, this is where it gets interesting. They're assuming a very modest growth rate of 3% of the growth of owning a home. They're only going to get a 3%. Now, we have documented time over time from CoreLogic, from FHFA, from Case-Shiller, that it's not 3%. It is far greater than that. In some cases, some of the lowest we've seen is 5.1. And I'll move it to that here in a minute. And that rent growth rate is at 3%, which we've already documented in the first quarter. It's on pace to be over 6%. It's already at 3.2 in the first quarter. So that's a little underestimated by double. And that the rate of return on the investment of owning a home is 4.5%. Again, don't think that that's correct. And that inflation's at 3. And we know inflation is not at 3 because, well, we've talked about that on the podcast numerous times. And then they're assuming a tax bill and then a marginal tax rate as well as your closing costs. And I think they've way overassumed closing costs on this because they're including, as Barry mentioned, prepaid items, which is your taxes and your insurance. And those are not closing costs. There's a big difference there. And then they're assuming this cost of selling the homes at 6%. Well, how many episodes have we done on what's going on the real estate world of basically selling a home now is really not 6%. So there's, there is in some cases, but in this case, I don't think that's exactly a fair. So we'll mark that down. Even if you use, most homes sell at 5.5 or 5, not 6. So we'll back that down here in a minute. And then the maintenance fees of owning a home. So here's what I want to do though. So they're saying it's $133,000 better to rent than to buy. Now, the purpose of this article, I think, is just to encourage people, hey, go rent. Don't worry about the housing market. It'll correct itself. I also think there's a lot of fear mongering in this. And that's why I get so worked up about these types of articles, because that's one of our responsibilities here on the podcast is that we want to debunk what the media is having to say to our audience out there. We want you guys to know that, listen, you should be making your own decisions, not being influenced. And, you may be one of the people who are like, why are we even focused on the Times? Well, they are a large publication. And I've seen some of the comments that come over when we talk about the Times before. But in this case, humor me and go with this, right? So if I change that monthly rent, and I think it'd be fair to say $3,000 for a $500,000 home. I don't think that's far off. I might think that's underestimating depending on the market you live in. But even if I move that needle to $3,000 on the rent, here's what's interesting. All of a sudden, just by moving that one thing, and we're going to move some other ones, you are saving more as a homeowner, $36,000 in 10 years. All I did was move from $2,000 to $3,000. And now you're saving money as a homeowner, which always goes to the fact that being a homeowner, you're going to actually save more than being a renter, which what makes this article so foolish to begin with, right? I just moved one thing to the accurate amount. The second thing I look at on here is this. If I go down to the home growth rate of 3% and I move it, I just told you the lowest was 5.5. I'm just going to move it to 4. We'll move it to 4. All of a sudden, you're saving $94,000 as a homeowner. All I did was move it from 3 to 4. It's 5.1. But you're saving $94,000 in this situation. Oh, if I go down here and I move one other thing, I'm just going to move the one sector of selling the home, the cost of selling the home from 6%. I'm just going to move it to a very humble 5.5, which is still above the national average. All of a sudden, you're saving $97,000. I just moved 3 things, and all of them are below the averages that we know are factual. You're close to $100,000 in 10 years to being a better homeowner. In a matter of 4 minutes, we debunked this whole article. I mean, honestly, the Times should be pretty ashamed of themselves for putting this out. And they list all their assumptions at the bottom, and they're pretty bad, openly admitting that their methodology is pretty skewed here. And I mean, they're even going as far as talking about Congress might do some things, which is part of our methodology. I mean, that's a big reach there. And it's in the fine print at the bottom. So, I mean, no one's going to read that, which is why it's at the bottom in fine print. The reality is this. Sham article, it is not ever better to be a renter long-term than being a homeowner. You are going to make more rate of return as a homeowner, and you're going to have further tax deductions, and you're going to be in a better position no matter what versus renting. And I think that's a big deal here. So I wanted to share that. And then for all of the people that are, and I know this is coming because I've seen it on our YouTube channel before, again, at What's Your One More. Hey, listen, buying at the peak, can't wait for it to fall, buying at the peak. We got an episode coming up for you because I tell you what, sometimes if you look at a trend line over the last 40 years, guess what? You're always buying at the peak. And we're going to talk more about that on the next episode. So until the next time, we'll see you guys at What's Your One More. So guys, if you like what you're hearing, please share this podcast. If you would, give us some sort of review. 5-star, appreciated. That's what we want. Leave us some comments on there. And we're on every platform that you listen to your favorite podcast on. And if you would, check us out our YouTube episode at What's Your One More. Subscribe and leave us some comments there as well. Till the next episode, we'll see you guys at What's Your One More.
Got one more shot, I'm gonna make it. One more chance, I'm gonna take it. I meant it when I said it, now it's time for me to do it. I got one life to live, so I put my all into it.